The Tokoro River flows into the Sea of Okhotsk on the east coast of Hokkaido. The bounteous river and sea and the nearby forest have helped sustain people in this region for more than 8,000 years. The Tokoro River basin is home to Kitami City, with the Tokoro area in the river's lower reaches. Tokoro is known for archaeological sites, scallops, and curling. The highlight of the archaeological sites is the Tokoro Site, which extends through 4 kilometers of coastal forest. The site is known for pit-dwelling depressions that are still visible at ground level. More than 3,000 pit-dwelling depressions have been found in this area, more at a single location than almost anywhere else in the world. Excavations of archaeological sites in the Tokoro area were launched in 1957 by archaeologists from the University of Tokyo. Digs have continued to this day with the cooperation of local residents. As a result of these surveys, 4 clusters of archaeological sites that include the remains of large groups of pit dwellings were collectively designated as a National Historic Site under the name the Tokoro Site. Their historic value has been widely recognized. The oldest known archaeological site in the lower reaches of the Tokoro River dates back to the Paleolithic period, about 24,000 years ago. For some time thereafter, traces of human activity become less apparent, but they resurface in the latter part of the initial Jomon period, roughly 8,500 years ago. The Tokoro Shell Mound dates from the Middle Jomon period, about 4,500 years ago. It shows that people in the area were making extensive use of the sea's bounties, such as oysters, common orient clams, and marine mammals, in a climate that was warmer than today's. Hokkaido has unique periods of history that are distinct from those of Japan's main island of Honshu. In the Yayoi period, Honshu saw the emergence of paddy rice cultivation and a transition towards an agrarian society, whereas in Hokkaido, hunting, fishing, and gathering continued until modern times. The period from the Yayoi period to the Kofun period on Honshu corresponds to the Epi-Jomon period in Hokkaido. During the Epi-Jomon period, rice cultivation was not introduced, and people continued to use pottery with cord mark impressions, the characteristic of pottery from the preceding Jomon period. Particularly noteworthy about the Epi-Jomon period is the presence of graves with many burial goods. The amber used for necklaces excavated in the Tokoro area is presumed to have been produced on Sakhalin. In fact, the Tokoro area is among the top Epi-Jomon sites in Hokkaido in terms of the number of amber objects that have been excavated. This indicates how people in Tokoro at that time flourished through interactions with peoples of various other regions. Toward the end of the Epi-Jomon period, people of the Okhotsk culture migrated in large numbers from northern regions to coastal areas in Hokkaido on the Sea of Okhotsk. These migrants looked different from the people who were already living in Hokkaido and brought with them bronze implements and other goods from the Eurasian continent. The Okhotsk culture was the culture of a maritime people whose way of life was influenced by their reliance on the sea for subsistence. From archaeological sites of this period, numerous tools for fishing and marine mammal hunting have been excavated, such as fishhooks and harpoon heads. The pit dwellings were large and hexagonal. Multiple families are assumed to have lived together. In the innermost area of a pit dwelling was a bone mound, an altar piled with the cranial bones of bears and other remains. One bone mound was found to have the cranial bones of a staggering 110 brown bears. Much like the presence of bone mounds, traces of animal-related rituals are a common feature of the Okhotsk culture. Among the archaeological finds from the culture are numerous carvings depicting bears and marine animals. Around the 7th century, the Epi-Jomon culture was significantly influenced by the agrarian culture of Honshu and eventually changed to the Satsumon culture. In the Tokoro area, the spread of the Satsumon culture in place of the Okhotsk culture around the 10th century is indicated by the explosion in the number of pit-dwelling remains. With strong influences from Honshu, square pit dwellings began to be constructed that had cooking stoves built alongside the walls. The Satsumon culture came to an end around the 13th century, after which pottery and pit dwellings were no longer used. These changes archaeologically demarcate a transition to the Ainu culture period. Just like elsewhere in Hokkaido, the Tokoro area has held the remains of ritual and burial sites dating from around the 15th century, known as sites for the ritual sending back of spirits, as well as the ruins of fortifications known as chashi dating from the 18th century. The culture of those who left these sites behind is thought to have evolved into the traditional Ainu culture. The archaeological sites in the lower reaches of the Tokoro River reveal largely uninterrupted traces of people's lives from the Jomon to the Ainu culture periods, traces of those who subsisted on the bounteous resources of the Tokoro River and the Sea of Okhotsk, as well as on nearby forests. These sites serve as invaluable exemplars for understanding the continuous transition of archaeological cultures in Hokkaido.